So happy to have you along. We are joined, as always, by Greg Engert, Beer Director for the Neighborhood Restaurant Group, a James Beard Award nominee, the group including Vermilion in Old Town, also Evening Star Cafe and Planet Wine in the Delray neighborhood. Happy New Year to you.
That's
Our
right.
first beer of the week of 2013. We've only been going a little over a year, but we've been in 2011, 2012, and now 2013. Greg, it's good to see you. Thanks as always. What's on tap this week?
So this week, I thought it would be a great opportunity to do a beer that I've been meaning to do for Beer of the Week for some time now, and finally got around to doing it. So this is Goose Island Bourbon County Brand Stout, a beer that is, interestingly, rather available in the area now, or as available as a really scarce beer would be. I should say.
Sounds like immediately like a reason to grab it anyway.
Yeah, if you see, and here's the thing about it. I'm saying this because, I mean, I'm going to talk a lot about what's going on with Goose Island and Anheuser-Busch InBev and all these things because it's a germane topic, I think, to craft beer today and beer in general. But before I even get to that, I should mention, currently AB InBev, Anheuser-Busch InBev, is the 100% owner of Goose Island Brewery out of Chicago. And one of the things that is interesting about this is that Anheuser-Busch, before it was taken over by InBev, has been actually in a distribution agreement with Goose Island. They've been distributing Goose Island beers in their distribution network for many years now, going back to 2006. But because of this, what I find fascinating is, AB products have certain places where they pop up quite a bit. And so, you'll kind of walk into a beer store that you're used to seeing, Stella, Hoegaarden, Leffe, Bud Light, Budweiser, Shock Top, the kind of AB products. Then you'll see some Goose Island 312, their wheat beer that's quite popular. Maybe you'll see some Great Lakes some Goose Island Christmas Ale, which is very good this year.
Sophie, we've
and then of
before.
course Matilda and Sophie and all those others. And then you'll see this super rare, pricey, and absolutely astonishing beer as well. So be on the lookout for it. You might be surprised where you find it in and around town. It's not just to be found at, the Whole Foods or the beer shops or things like that. So really kind of an interesting thing. And interesting about being involved with AB InBev is that you see a little bit more of it and more so each time it comes out. So Bourbon County goes back to, near the beginning of Goose Island. So it opened, John Hall opened Goose Island in 1988 as just the brew pub in Clybourne in Chicago. A little bit later, he ended up opening a production facility and then a second brew pub at Wrigleyville in Chicago as well. His son, Greg Hall, was the brewmaster for many, many years until 2011. He left the company when the sale occurred to AB InBev. And Greg Hall is one of the most respected brewers out there. And he was very, very innovative very early on. In fact, you could make the claim that he was the first person to barrel age beer in bourbon barrels. Some people would say Sam Adams, Jim Koch with Triple Bock Millennium. Others would say Bourbon County because in 1992, to celebrate the 1,000th batch ever brewed at the Clybourne location, he decided to do something interesting and different. And so for that, he brewed a very intense, strong imperial stout, and at that time matured it for 100 days in Jim Beam oak bourbon barrels, and that was the first Bourbon County stout going back to 1992. And I remember, Goose Island wasn't available in our area until recently, 2008, 2009, and I had some bottles kind of that I miraculously got my hands on from the early days. I hadn't had it in a long time. And in the interim, I had lots and lots of other barrel-aged stouts. So I was wondering, I was like, man, I wonder if I'm going to love this as much as I did before now that I've had so many others. And it still is, after all the others have come out and after the AB InBev purchase, to me, it still is one of the finest examples of barrel-aged stout.
Well, you and I share a love of beer, and our sisters live in Chicago.
Yes, exactly.
So I had Goose Island many years ago before it came out this way.
Yeah,
and impressed with the
Fantastic
the
stuff.
IPA the first time I had it.
Yeah, and the thing is so interesting is we're seeing more and more of the rarities out here, which is cool. They do make a little bit more kind of ubiquitous brands like 312 and Honkers and Nut Brown and IPA, things like that. But they have that vintage series, they call it, which includes Pepe Nero and Matilda and Sophie and Père Jacques, which are more and more available all the time. And then they have these incredible rarities, and lots of them. They make some rare sours like Madame Rose, and then they have a whole string of stouts that are incredible now. So, you've got the Bourbon County, but you'll also, if you're looking around on the shelves right now, you'll find some Bourbon County Coffee Stout. That's Imperial Stout aged in bourbon barrels with coffee roasted by Intelligentsia Coffee in Chicago. That's an annual release. They've got this thing called Cherry Rye. That's Bourbon County Cherry Rye. That's also out right now. If you can find it, grab it. It's awesome. It's Imperial Stout aged in rye whiskey barrels with cherries. And then even you're going to start seeing King John, which is just an Imperial Stout with cocoa nibs, and Night Stalker, which is a really hoppy Imperial Stout. So in some ways I bring this up because, some people were maybe rightfully nervous about the complete buying of Goose Island, but it looks as though in the year and a half since it's happened or so, that things are kind of going on the same way and the flavors are still there. And I should also mention that, AB has had a portion of Goose Island through distribution for many years. And Craft Brewers Alliance, which is Widmer and Red Hook, they merged and purchased Kona Brewing Company. They're like that. They also had a stake in Goose Island that was sold to AB InBev as well in 2011. And Craft Brewers Alliance is partially owned, 32% or so, by AB InBev. So it's not as though everything's changed this year. It's been kind of going that way for some time. But I will say John Hall was kept on in the CEO role even after the sale, and he did just recently, about a month ago, fully step down. So it's kind of officially now all AB InBev. So we'll see what happens.
Okay.
Amazing. It's great. The layering of the barrels themselves, beyond the bourbon, it's just so much coconut, pecan, biscotti, vanilla, all layered in with that richness.
I could get in trouble with that. That is tasty.
And actually, this year, this surprised me. It's always been obviously very strong, 13.5%, etc.
Woo.
This year, unbeknownst to me, when I found my first bottles and very quickly dove into them, it had snuck up to 15%, which doesn't seem like a too huge difference, but it felt like it was. So it's 50%. You want to talk about vintage beers laying down? This stuff will do wonderfully. I have vintages of this going back, I think, to 2008 now that we've been aging in house. Amazing with that. That said, though, I'm not going to tell you not to age certain things that could age. I mean, I'll tell you not to age IPAs and Pilsners. But when it comes to, I find this one to be the right one to age of the bourbon counties we can get our hands on. When it comes to the coffee, and even when it comes to, and also when it comes to the cherry rye, I prefer that relatively fresh. Okay. Just because you lose out a lot of the coffee aromatic and that fruit aromatic when it ages. This one, however, not with those adjunct seasonings, is great for years and years to come.
Okay. What would you pair this with?
This is dessert beer, okay, in a glass by itself. You could also, this is one of those things.
Pair it with a fire.
Yeah, you can pair it with ice cream. Okay. I just this and some really great like house handmade ice cream is fantastic. Also, you could do it with your chocolate cake based on all of the chocolatey flavors, or bring it to creme brulee or those kind of less chocolatey desserts and let the chocolate kind of come in through the stout itself.
All right, we have a question from Joe Babarski, who is writing in about a beer, a rare beer I've learned from you. It's his wife's favorite beer, Stille Nacht Reserve. I was mangling French last week. I think Stille Nacht is Silent Night in German. Yeah. So Stille Nacht Reserve, he's asking if it's available in the DC area.
It is available, and it is very, very scarce. I think between DC and Maryland, there were 10 six-pack cases. So you're looking at 60, 750 milliliter bottles between all of Maryland and DC. We do currently still have some at Church King Birch and Barley.
Oh, well, there you go, Joe.
So if you really want to taste it, come on in, and you can have it. And I'll tell you, it is a revelation how great this beer is. So it's from Dodola Brewers, the mad brewers of Belgium, of Flanders and Belgium, that craft amazing beers like Ara beer and Boscoon and Or beer, fantastic things that are universally admired and sought out in very small batches. They make an equivalent of I think 1,000 barrels a year of beer, which is nothing. It's less than most brew pubs make. So we're happy to see any of that over here. And each holiday season they come out with Stillenacht, which is their unbelievably delicious, strong, kind of Belgian pale, amber in color, not too dark. And so we see that. We'll see it on draft. We see it in bottles year over year. The Reserva, just like what they do with the Or beer Reserva, which we see annually as well, the Reserva is Stillenacht that has been aged for 25 months in oak barrels previously used to hold Bordeaux red wine. And so it is just an incredible, incredible thing. Very small batch. And even more incredible about it is that we really haven't seen a vintage release of this in the States since the mid-2000s, 2005 or so. They did make it the last time. I think they released some in 2008, but that was hand-bottled in 750s and pretty much only available to people who were friends with Chris, the owner, or went to the brewery itself. So it's been many years since we've seen it. It's got a huge price tag, but worth every penny.
I'm just going to go.
Yeah. Okay. Should have done that for beer of the week.
I'll save some for Joe and his wife. Don't let me loose on it, Joe. If you've got a question for Greg, the email is beeroftheweek@wtop.com. Happy New Year again, Greg.
Happy New Year.
Thanks as always.
Thank you.
Everyone, please do always drink responsibly, and be sure to bring your thirst next time for another Beer of the Week.